Hi guys, I'm Shmee. Hello and welcome back to the channel where you join me for what is now my 4th day of ownership of the brand new Toyota GR Supra. Since I picked it up in London, this car has already travelled with me on its first road trip through France and Belgium over to Germany. I did a lap of the Nurburgring Nordschleife joined by Misha and then took it down to Munich for Cars and Coffee, one of the craziest events. So in the 3 days that I've owned this car up till now, I've driven it 1,700 kilometres in total. That's not exactly bad going, particularly considering this is one of the A90 editions, one of only 90 launch cars in the entirety of Europe. Now, given I have basically been living in this thing for the last couple of days, that's why I wanted to shoot another video with it. We'll have some variation on the channel to come soon, but I'm about to fly out, which means we won't be seeing it for a short while. But I've experienced quite a few things so far, some things about it that I love, and some things about it that I hate. Now, I know this is arguably a little bit cliche, but I think there's a lot of interest in this car, so I'd like to give you my feedback, having spent quite so much time already behind the wheel. So let's talk about it then, some things I love and hate about the new Supra. I'm going to start this off then with the things that I like about the new Supra before we move on to those that I dislike. And I'm going to cover a whole different variety of aspects of this. For example, the hardware, the powertrain, what it's like to drive, some of the controls, but also the experience buying the car and the attitudes that you get from other people, which have been quite interesting. And yes, I have already heard a lot of times, nice BMW. But anyway, to move on to what I like, and as a car guy, the first and overall thing I would like to talk about are the driving dynamics and the composure of the chassis, which we really experienced during the brief outing on the Nurburgring, and I will discover a lot more in future. But prior to taking delivery of my car, I'd driven a couple of the new Supras before. I went out to drive a prototype on track in Spain, then I went also to experience an A90 during the press launch on the roads, and then more recently, a couple of weeks ago, met up with the Stradman in the US to experience his just after he had taken delivery. But obviously I've done a lot more driving with my car now. As I said, 1,700 kilometers, that's a bit over 1,000 miles in just 3 days. I think that means I've basically spent about 6 or 7 hours a day inside the Supra, which is way too much time. But anyway, the driving, I had hoped that it was going to be really good. In fact, I expected that it was going to be really good. A car engineered and developed, of course, between Toyota and BMW, but the Toyota having a number of differences to it. But I've been blown away actually driving it. The way the car feels and the way it sits, it's really inspiring. And I'll also talk a little bit more about where I think it can develop later on and what more we might be able to do with this car. But it's just that feedback and connection you actually have driving it that really makes you feel confident and enjoy it an awful lot. And this car, it's small, it's nimble, and it basically just comes together really, really well. It's a very, very good package. So let's move on then to talk about the next thing on my list, which is going to be the experience buying it. Now, normally at this kind of price point, you don't really get anything particularly special. The car in the UK was £56,495. You could kind of only have it in one specification, the A90 Edition, or you could have the Pro or the normal spec. But for the A90, you couldn't change anything. It came as one complete package. But along the way, there have been so many things that have made myself as a customer and the other customers feel involved with the brand. You get letters, communication. There was a gift at Christmas to remind you that the car was going to be coming. There was a special gift that came with the car, just a key ring, but it was the way the whole thing has been packaged up. They even sent actually some wrapping paper in the same design as the camo, the red, black and white wrapping paper. So all along the way, there have been updates. There was an invitation to the customers to go and drive the car at Thruxton, a track in the UK. Unfortunately, I couldn't make that, but it's been an experience that punched way above where a Supra you would normally expect it to be. The third item that I'm going to put on this list of things that I like is that, my goodness, this car is the most unbelievable talking point. Everybody has an opinion about the new Supra. Now, the reason I put this on my positives list is that I'm a car guy. I like talking about cars, engaging, hence making these videos in the first place. But everywhere I have stopped with this car, people know what it is and people ask questions, whether it's to grab some food, whether it's to stop for a fill-up. Each and every time I go anywhere, somebody nobody has asked me about it. Now, people's opinions have been split so far with this thing. Some people say that there is no way this car should wear the Supra badge. It is not what the previous generation was all about. Some people absolutely love it. Some people think this is developed with BMW. How can it be a Supra? Some people think it looks incredible. The variation in different responses, and I see this in the comments, and I'm sure you guys watching this video also have your own opinions about this car. But that's the thing I find fascinating. Cars encourage discussion and conversation, and I've never seen a car that does it quite like the new Supra. Now, talking about driving the car again, one thing about this, and I've got to apologise for a mistake that I actually made, a slip of the tongue we could say, and I'm going to pop open the engine bay just for a second. In a previous video, for some unknown reason, I referred to it as a flat six. Of course, it is not a flat six. I was filming at the time at Apex at the Nurburgring, where previously I'd been filming with my GT3, and I think it was just a slip of the tongue. But this engine is a 3-litre twin-scroll turbo inline six. Officially, it makes 340 horsepower and 500 Newton meters. But there is no way that this car only makes 340 horsepower. No way at all. And I mean, I'm running it in. I have not driven this over about 4,500 RPM, because you can't until you get to 2,000 for warranty and all of that jazz. But there's no way that it's only that. If anything, I think this has to be up towards 400 horsepower. So hopefully at some point I will get the opportunity to dyno it and find out how much it actually makes. Now, my point about that is that it's basically a riot to drive. A decent amount of power, that is definitely on the likes list. And the other thing that goes along with that is how small the car actually is. Now, I'm more used to driving, I suppose, much bigger cars, much more high performance cars, but this thing is so small and nimble. It's a delight to actually drive it. It's also quite usable, all things considered, as well. You've got a decent amount of storage space. I'll just come around, you know, in the boot at the back, if I can grab the key out of my pocket awkwardly. Yes, it's a BMW key. It does have a Toyota badge, but it is a BMW key. Back here, if we open this up, I'm going to talk actually about that in a second. You've got a decent amount of space here. You can take out the parcel shelves, you can fit in plenty of luggage without the car having a particularly big footprint, and while still being a very fun thing to drive. So I think that's, well, basically 5 or so things in total that I like very much about the new Supra. To quickly touch on the design, I'm a bit split in terms of my own opinion on this. I find the front of the car a little bit awkward looking. It is not as good looking as the FT1 concept, on which, of course, the car was first based. But then you come around to the rear, and I think this is one of the best looking rear ends of a car in this segment that has ever existed. That, I'm a big fan of how that all shapes up. But the first thing that I'm going to put on my dislikes list, and this is probably one that's fairly obvious if you've been following my channel before, is these. The fake vents. There are so many fake vents all around this car which do absolutely nothing, and I'm not a big fan of those. Fortunately, we're mostly saved at the back. Note, we've got one just in here, but all of those do nothing. Yes, there is the talk that you can change them and you could upgrade the car. For example, you could put a vent here that is open to allow swelling air to come out from the wheel arches, but basically they're visual and not functional, and that goes against a lot of things that I like about the car. So I'm a bit torn up about that. The thing that I dislike probably the most about it overall has to be those fake vents. Yes, you've got a lot of openings down here, and as you'll know, that's not going to stay there. Don't worry guys, the number plate is going to move, but this is all open. Well, that bit's not open at all. This side has the towing eye, which is where I'm going to be putting a bracket for the number plate. You can see that just in there for the minute. Let's close this back up, click it into place. But then again here, more fake vents, same obviously around the other side. So that's number 1 on the list of dislikes, the fake vents. 2 further things around the back of the car, and the first of those, which seems to only be for European spec cars, is the inclusion of the word Toyota, the badge there. It's like, that's a Toyota badge. Is this just needed so that people think it's not a BMW? Is that why they've done it? I think you can take it off, and I probably will, because we've got Toyota, we've got Supra, we've got Gazoo Racing. We don't need that. It looks like an afterthought. I don't know why they stuck that on. So to me, that badge is an absolute no-go. Another thing then, back on the rear hatch. As you saw earlier, the only way you can open it is either pressing the button there on the key or pressing the button just down here. There is no physical button here to open the boot, the trunk. There's no button. They could easily have put one here. Yeah, you've got a reversing camera in the center, but they didn't. There's no way to do that, and I don't quite understand why. It's not my first car I've owned with a rear hatch. that hasn't had a button. For example, the AMG GTR, the Ferrari FF. I don't know why it's a thing. I don't know why they don't just put one on. It's not exactly the hardest thing in the world, and it would make it a little bit easier to use. The next two things on my list are both on the interior. In general, the interior is lovely. Of course, my car has the A90 specification, so as well as the silver storm grey paintwork on the exterior, you have the red leather interior with the split from the driver's side to the passenger side. So the driver's side has the red steering wheel, red knee pad, red door cards. The passenger side, it's all black as opposed to red, which is quite funky. Some people again love, some people hate that. I think it's cool. It's just unique for this special edition. But there are two things about the technology to discuss. And generally speaking, the technology is borrowed from the Z4. Let me just start it up. In front of us, we've got a half analog, half digital display. Some people think it should have borrowed the Z4 M40i's display, the sister car of course, which is a full digital display, but with a new skin, a new user experience. I quite like this mix. Some people think it looks a bit cheaper than a full digital display, but I like that it's unique and distinct. But overall, the controls are literally all BMW. The software is BMW, except where the logos would have said it was a BMW, and now it says it's a Toyota. It all works pretty well overall. There are, however, one or two things that annoy me. On the steering wheel, you have buttons here to do the volume, up and down, but there's no hotkey to just mute it. So if you want to mute your audio, if you're looking forwards, and we do have a nice head-up display, you have to fiddle around to find that button, which is actually quite far away and hard to press when, let's say, you're driving down the autobahns looking forward. You have to take your eyes all the way down here, and it's fiddly. I don't know why they couldn't just put a mute button right there. Would have made life a lot easier. The other thing, also to do with the steering wheel, is about a piece of technology, the lane keeping assistance. Now, normally in cars, I'm a big fan of tech that makes, well, driving a little bit safer and a little bit easier. I'm just going to stop it for a second, because at the end of the day, safety, well, should always come first. But with this, the steering wheel tugs at you if you drift across a lane so aggressively and violently that you just want to turn it off. It's annoying. Now, I've used that kind of thing in many cars before. My G63 has it, for example, but this does it so aggressively that it's unpleasant. It's annoying. So I'm not a big fan of that at all. Amusingly, I think I sound at the moment like I'm having a bit of a whinge fest about the new Supra, but that's not intentional at all. These are all fairly insignificant in the bigger picture, and overall, I've been incredibly impressed with this. And like I said, I've done a lot of driving in it over the last couple of days. You've got a very, very comfortable seating position. Perhaps the side bolsters could go a touch wider. You do have an electronic switch here to make them wider and narrower, along with your other electronic seat controls. It would be nice as well to have something to release the seat back, to fold it forwards. Yes, of course, you can put luggage in through the rear hatch, but sometimes you might want to get at something that's just behind you. The steering wheel, also, small thing, has quite a narrow grip compared to what I expected. Normally you have a chunkier steering wheel on this kind of car, but again, you could actually change the steering wheel with an aftermarket option as well. So overall, I tell you what, my expectations of this car were fairly high, but with absolute certainty, this car goes beyond what I expected it to be. The way I've been driving it, in the past I've been doing that with the likes of my AMG GTR, my Ferrari GTC 4 Lusso, and this is of course a very, very different price category, but the car does so much of what the others do that I've really, really been impressed by it on that front. To conclude though, just a few of the thoughts and experiences I've had with the car so far, a bit of a rewind as well. I used to shoot some of this kind of video back when I got my Focus RS, my Cayman GT4, my Ferrari FF, and in particular with the amount of time that I've been spending in the new GR Supra and the amount, I think, of hype around the whole internet about this car. And yes, I will confess, I certainly bought in myself a little bit to the hype around it and how long we'd been waiting for the car, but that's why I'm so pleased that it meets the expectations that I had from it as well. I don't regret my purchase in any possible way, and I'm enjoying shooting the videos, driving this car, and there will be a lot more to come as well. In the meantime, I'm going to be flying off. I've got some odd errands all over the place as usual, and then I'll be back in the USA in not too long as well before coming back to potentially look into what we might do with this in the future. For now though, thank you very much for watching. As always guys, that's it for this time though. I will see you again very soon. Cheers!